This is a true story which is based on a real incident which shows the dark history of slavery. Movie tells the story of a runaway slave, Peter, who is the protagonist of the movie. Peter's story highlights the brutal realities of enslavement. Watch till the end and get to know about a dark chapter of history. During that time, approximately 4 lakh black individuals were enslaved, whom the army had liberated. This incident dates back to 1863. A man named Peter, along with his wife Dodian and their children, worked in the cotton fields as slaves. It is then that he realizes he has been sold to a new owner, and some people have come to take him. Before parting, he begins to pray with his family. Then, some white people arrive to take him. His children provide many reasons to save him, but the white individuals dismiss all arguments, forcibly taking him with them. They beat him and made him sit in a vehicle where several other slaves were already present. Peter's children start running behind the vehicle to save him. Peter promises his children that he will come back one day. After a lengthy journey, they reach a construction site where railway tracks are being laid. The conditions there are 3 times worse than the fields they came from. The slaves who attempted to escape had their heads severed as a warning, hanging above the main gate. All the slaves are confined in a cage. Despite hard work and good behavior, the whites beat and humiliate those slaves. There were also many wild dogs present, which they would use to track down any slave attempting to escape after they had fled. If a slave attempted to escape, the whites would beat him with a whip, and sometimes they would brand him with a hot iron rod, and sometimes they would be shot. Fassel is the boss there, and 2 men, Harrington and Knowles, are Fassel's friends. Peter tries to behave well there, but when he helps his friend Gordon who falls, a guard starts shouting at him. One evening, when all the slaves are sent back to their cage, they see a man named John, who is yelling in pain due to a hot stamp on his cheek, trembling in fear, and Peter tells him to think about his family and assures him that they are here only to work. Peter reminds them of God and says that God will help them. However, his companion John argues that God doesn't care, citing their terrible circumstances as evidence. Peter, who doesn't respond to John, remains silent. After a while, Peter overhears the guards discussing something important. He learns that Lincoln has emancipated the slaves, and now all the slaves are heading to meet Baton Rouge for assistance. If Peter and his companions go there, they will be saved. The guards' conversation stops when they learn that Thomas did not prepare good food for them. They begin to punish Thomas, but Peter intervenes, treating him like a child and asking them to let him go. The guard, taking it as an insult, starts to shoot at Peter. However, Fassel stops the guard because he now sees a different attitude in Peter. A few moments later, when Peter returns to his pen, Fassel tells him that he is his god, and Peter is his dog. Peter responds, asking for meat to be fed to him like a dog. Fassel simply smiles and leaves. However, the next day, he puts Peter in chains and restrains him on his knees. Fassel's dog tied quite close to Peter. He barks and growls at Peter during this time, thoroughly memorizing Peter's scent. During lunch, Peter informs his companions about Lincoln and Baton Rouge, explaining that they need to navigate through muddy paths to reach there, a journey of 5 days. Some slaves are hesitant due to the difficulty of avoiding the swamp, but Peter asserts that they won't survive much longer there, so some agree to undertake the journey. Now, all they need to do is wait for the right time to escape. During one day's work, a laborer dies, and the guards instruct Peter to drag the body to a pit where many slaves' bodies are already present. Instead of burying them, the guards pour chemicals on the bodies and set them on fire. Some white laborers are present to perform the task, but they insist that a black man should handle the burning of the bodies because it stinks too much. They then force Peter into the task and make him start pouring the chemicals. At that moment, Peter realizes that this is the perfect opportunity to escape. Explosions were common at the construction site, so he started waiting for an explosion to divert everyone's attention. As soon as the explosion occurs, he attacks the guards, killing them, and before fleeing, he grabs a knife. Other slaves, witnessing this, start fighting back as well, attacking some guards and initiating their escape. John takes a guard's gun and runs away. Seeing the slaves escaping, the guards start firing, and several slaves are killed in the gunfire. The remaining slaves run towards the jungle for safety. Fassel attacks Peter with his gun, but Peter manages to escape. Fassel sends his men to capture Peter and leaves the dogs unleashed. Peter, along with his companions, successfully navigates through the muddy paths, finding their way into the swamp. However, Tom becomes frightened upon seeing a crocodile in the swamp and decides not to enter. Meanwhile, Fassel's dog comes and catches Tom during this moment of hesitation. Fassel interrogates Tom about his companions, but Thomas remains tight-lipped. Fassel threatens Tom's, saying that if he doesn't reveal information about his comrades, he will kill him. Tom responds that all he knows is that he has to go into the swamp, and as he enters, Fassel shoots him from behind. On the other side, Peter and his companions successfully cross the swamp. Peter tells them that they should move forward by crossing another swamp, but John reacts strongly, stating that he will not take orders from anyone anymore. He will make his own decisions. Then, John takes his gun and heads down another path. Gordon decides to stay with Peter. However, Peter thinks that if they go their separate ways, it will be challenging to track them. Peter reminds Gordon that they should follow the sound of Lincoln's horn. After hearing this, Gordon ventures into the jungle. Peter begins his search for the right path, but unfortunately, he realizes that Fassel's gunshot has wounded his leg. He knows he needs to stop the bleeding quickly, or the dogs will pick up his scent. After a while, Peter reaches a white family's place where they also have slaves. He ties the tree bark around his wound to prevent excessive bleeding. He manages to reach a water source, quenching his thirst. A girl notices Peter running and starts ringing a bell. Upon hearing the bell, Fassel arrives and begins to chase Peter. Peter runs as fast as he can. Eventually, he stops to tie his wound with a shirt he had stolen from the white family's house. He then goes a little further and hides the shirt in the jungle to mislead the dogs while he takes refuge in a pond. Fassel and his men think they've outsmarted Peter, believing he has crossed to the other side of the pond. After they leave, Peter emerges from the water. Suddenly, a crocodile attacks him, but Peter manages to kill the crocodile using his knife and saved himself. During the night, Peter hides in a tree. The next morning, Fassel and his men find the dead crocodile and realize that Peter is still alive and has escaped from there. The next day, Peter continues his journey, covering his body with mud and animal dung to mask his scent. After that, he has to cross another swamp. In this challenging moment, he reflects on his family, attempting to control his fear through prayer. Suddenly, the sun shines brightly in the sky, which he interprets as a positive sign, giving him the strength to move forward. Fassel instructs his men to search for Peter in different groups. Now, Peter discovers a treehouse on a tree where he finds water and some food. There are also some hot coals available. He lights a burning coal in a bucket, climbs up a tree, and starts extracting honey from a beehive. Fassel sees the smoke from the burning coal and quickly starts chasing Peter. Near the treehouse, there is also a boat with a hidden snake. Peter removes the snake with a stick and, enjoying the honey, departs from there in the boat. Then we see Dodian. Her owner informs her that he has sold her to a new owner who will come to take her in 2 days. Dodian is deeply saddened by this news. She decides to take a drastic step to avoid being sold to a new owner. While working, she deliberately injures herself severely with a machine, making it look like an accident. Fassel's dog picks up Peter's scent, and just before Peter crosses the river, Fassel determines Peter's location. As Peter advances through the jungle, he encounters John, but John is not interested in listening to Peter, because now Fassel's men are also pursuing him. Peter tries to explain that they are no longer being chased, but John is determined to run, and at that moment, they hear the barking of dogs. Peter hides inside a dry tree to save his life, and John climbs up a tall tree. And when John refuses to surrender, Fassel's men shoot him, making him fall. Fassel asks him about Peter, but John remains silent. Then, Fassel cuts off his head and gives it to Harrington so that he can hang it at the main gate, serving as a warning to other slaves about the consequences of attempting to escape. Peter is unable to bear the sight of his friend's death and closes his eyes in sorrow. After they leave, Peter comes out, and upon seeing his friend, his soul shudders. Amid this grief, he walks a long distance. Suddenly, Peter notices horses running in the distance. As he continues walking, he sees a house where a fire has broken out. Peter understands that this is the house of the whites, and the enslaved people inside, who have heard about Lincoln's rebellion, have set the house on fire in retaliation. Peter takes out his knife and enters the house, gradually searching through all the rooms. When he reaches the dining table, seeing food after so many days, he starts eating it. At that moment, he hears a sound from one of the rooms. Upon investigating, he finds a girl there. He picks her up and tries to save her, but that's when Harrington arrives, aiming a gun at him and instructing him to step away from the girl, and at that moment, girl dies. Upon her death, Peter becomes furious, and he kills Harrington with the cross pendant. At that moment, Fassel arrives, and Peter, upon hearing his voice, hides in the fields. When Fassel's dog approaches him, Peter shoots and kills the dog. When Fassel sees the corpses of his special spoon-fed slaves, he becomes furious and decides to capture Peter at any cost. The next morning, Peter goes to a beach where there are many corpses of white people. Those people had been killed by Lincoln's army, which was trying to save the slaves. But as Peter goes a little further, he notices some ships on the sea. Peter realizes that Lincoln's army is nearby. Thinking about his freedom, Peter is very happy, but suddenly Fassel attacks him from behind. Fassel offers meat to Peter, which Peter had asked for when he was imprisoned in the cage. Fassel asks him to beg for it, but Peter refuses. In anger, Fassel raises his gun, but before he can shoot Peter, someone else kills Fassel. Fassel is attacked by Lincoln's army, and they rescue Peter and take him to their camp. Due to the gunshot, Peter's leg gets infected. He has been wandering in the jungle for several days, making him quite weak. Medical treatment is provided for him in the camp, and he constantly thinks about his family. After a few days, Peter recovers, and he seeks permission from a soldier to meet his family. However, due to being a former slave, he doesn't have any ID proof, and he doesn't have any information about his family. He doesn't even know his age, so the soldier doesn't permit him to leave. The soldier tells Peter that he can either work in the fields or join the army. When Peter realizes that joining the army could be a way to save his family and attain freedom, he decides to join the army. Then Peter goes to get his uniform, and some people approach him, asking to take his picture. Seeing the white people again makes Peter uneasy, but when his companion reassures him that they are good people, he agrees. They are white photographers who want to reveal the harsh reality of slavery to the world. So, they ask Peter to take off his shirt to show the scars, which bear witness to the torture inflicted during slavery. After this, Peter is taken to the army general, who inquires about other slaves. The next morning, all the soldiers are taken to the battlefield where the war is about to take place. The general motivates them, saying that they are fighting for freedom. Their determination in the face of battle is unwavering, and they fight with great courage. Despite being wounded, Peter displays exceptional valor, and they emerge victorious in the battle. After this, their army went to all the fields nearby, and wherever black people were made slaves, they freed them. Then Peter goes to the same place where his family used to work in the cotton fields. There, all the slaves become very happy upon hearing the news of freedom, and they start crying tears of joy. Their white master is shot by the army. After that, Peter starts looking for his family. At first, he doesn't see them, but Peter stops for a while and prays, and then he sees his wife and children, who run towards him and hug him with joy. This story is based on a true incident, and in the movie's end, we are shown a positive image of Peter. And this is how Peter completed his promise, which he did, that he will come back to his family.